when you think about the timing of catching those waves, those big waves as they sort of come every 15 years or so, right? Who makes most of the money for the first 5 to 10 years on those waves? It's the VCs and private equity, because they get to invest in the startups of all the names of the big companies we've talked about, where the public doesn't get the first bite for usually somewhere between 7 to 10 years. So 1,000x returns are already going to happen in many AI companies over the rest of this decade, and the public will not even have a chance to participate. Versus essentially everything we've done has been in some way oriented to the public. We donated our original intellectual property as a public standard to a global standards organization, as a public asset. They actually declare it a public imperative. That's the highest designation. We write a book describing our entire vision for the future and the role of these technologies and the concerns we have around them and the importance of building things like standards and being able to govern them. And then we take our company public so the public can actually own it along with us. So if you'd like to come on the wave of the next generation of AI here, where else are you going to get your exposure to AI? You can't invest in a VC. I mean, maybe a handful of us can, but you're going to buy Microsoft to its exposure to OpenAI. That's marginal. This is, I think Verses is the only pure play horizontal AI company in the world right now, but we're also one that happens to be public.
Guys, welcome back. So we're sitting here with Gabriel Rene, CEO of VERSES Technologies. Guys, if this is a story you haven't seen yet, make sure you watch our first video. Me and Gabe probably spent an hour together digging into everything VERSES and AI. This is kind of a follow-up to that. Gabe, thank you so much for taking some more time for us.
It's great to be back, Kevin.
Right on. So for the investors, if you're looking to buy the stock, this is, if you're Canadian, VERS.NE, that's on the NEO. For our American friends, it trades over the counter, VRSSF. You guys recently listed the warrants, which are actually already super valuable, I've noticed. That's VERS.WT.A, if that's more your flavor. Gabe, if somebody is not familiar with the company, let's just start from the top. Give us a quick little overview. What exactly is VERSES?
Sure. So VERSES is a next generation AI company. We're essentially building out the world's first AI operating system upon which third-party developers can build and deploy AI applications for anything. So what Apple was to the smartphone era, we're looking to be for the AI era.
So you pretty much can't say the word AI now without going into ChatGPT. It seems that no matter what social media feed I scroll through, it's do this, change your life with ChatGPT, become a millionaire with ChatGPT, outsource your job with ChatGPT. So let's just dig into that, because obviously you guys are in the AI space. Clearly with the success of ChatGPT, how does VERSES fit into this whole landscape?
Well, for one, I think everyone recognizes there's a landscape, or perhaps a wave, right? So we're the surfers that got up at 5 a.m., got down there, we're like, we know a swell's coming, right? And so everyone's like, well, those guys doing out there, it's completely flat. It's like, we've been around the world, we can kind of read this stuff, and then if you kind of look at maybe just around the first week of December or so, Lensa blows up, actually. It's kind of the first thing, right? So Lensa is a little app where you upload like 20 pictures of yourself and it makes like 20 different and all of a sudden on Instagram, everyone's making these AI photos, right? And I think it was fastest growing app in the App Store. Then you fast forward a few weeks and ChatGPT comes out. Now, this is part of a class of sort of new era AI. It's based on the same technology, which is called neural nets. Machine learning processes that use a process called deep learning, where they've got lots and lots of these neural nets that kind of, you feed it big data and it churns through all this stuff and you get these outputs. That has resulted in this new category called generative AI, right? And so essentially you give it a little bit of text, the text prompt, hey, do this, show me that, write me a book about, or write me an essay on War and Peace. Write me a poem, about my love of Star Wars in the style of the King James Bible, right? So like very creative sort of things. You can text, and then you get Mid-Journey and Stable Diffusion, ones that are doing text to imageries, paintings, and illustrations, and photography, and so obviously marketing, copy, and customer service, and everything is sort of now being threatened. There's reports, 90% of content on the web being created by AI by 2025. So the wave, we saw the wave coming, and then there must have been some sort of shelf there that the thing just kicked up, and suddenly New York Times, Wall Street Journal headline news, ChatGPT, the sort of chatbot that you can talk to for hours, ask for information, ask for explanations, ask for guidance, ask the sort of the best advisor that anyone could want at that scale, goes from 0 users effectively to 1 million in 5 days, which I think Facebook was several years, Instagram was a year, Netflix, all these the biggest, fastest ones have been somewhere between 6 months and 2 years, and this is 5 days. So that was Christmas. By the time we surface into the new year, we're not even done with January. Microsoft shows up and says, we'd like to invest $10 billion at a $29 billion valuation into OpenAI, the company that really the research lab that developed ChatGPT and DALL-E, which is an image-based one. And so that plus like Jarvis.ai, which people are using for marketing and stuff, did like $100 million last year or something to that effect. There's a few of these that have all sort of popped. So really, suddenly 2023 becomes the starting point for really what is going to now be the AI era of software.
Well, you guys nailed it on timing. And yeah, that DALL-E one you mentioned, I played around with that. I typed in, I got it to do McDonald's sushi, and it literally made an image of McDonald's sushi. It's insane. So, okay, well, that's how you guys fit in with the AI landscape. Maybe if we zoom out a little bit, you kind of alluded to this already with like the developers side of thing. So let's maybe dig into more like how is VERSES going to power kind of the AI world from a developer's perspective?
Well, one way to think about this is that in December, you have, I don't know, say 10 million developers around the world that develop and or support the apps that are on your smartphone today, right? Developers have been making apps. The smartphone era really starts, 2007, about 15 years ago. And so for the last 15 years, it's built up millions of developers. After New Year's, every single one of those are trying to figure out how to build an artificial intelligence application or AI-driven solution or an intelligent agent for something, right? Or every single category that's on the App Store today. So you have a built-in base of developers, and what have they been doing? They're searching all over the web and Twitter and in and in all kinds of forums and feeds about how do I use this, how do I build this, how do I connect things to it, how do I write? And so what we want to do is essentially enable that capability. What we've been doing for the last several years is building out this operating system we call KOSM, which is designed not only to take in text inputs, but to take in real-time information, the Internet of Things data, be able to spatialize it and have multidimensional inputs. And what this is good for is that instead of just generating text or imagery, or even where we're going to go next with this, we're seeing music and videos. There'll be some film student that bails out of film school in the next few years here, and just goes and makes an entire film from scratch by themselves with an AI, and they'll be like the most popular film here. They'll put it on YouTube or something, or Netflix will pick it up, and so these things are fantastic and are going to change the world. That there's demand across the spectrum here for every category, but what's missing is the ability to easily develop these things. Right now, to make an AI, you have to be a company with access to big data. You have to basically spend 2 years. Like ChatGPT is based on GPT-3. That's a 2-year-old. The underlying capability is out there for 2 years, and until they stuck literally a chat interface on top of it, hardly anyone cared. So those systems are not designed for building out applications, to building out enterprise solutions. They don't have the sort of support and tools that Apple, when Apple came out with the iPhone, they had this sort of software developer kit. So we're building out those developer tools today, and over the next few quarters, we're going to start to roll those out. In addition, we have them for the type of scale for enterprise and industrial applications. So it's not just sort of smaller, developers, but we want to really support that whole spectrum. Finally, as I mentioned, like the way these AIs are made, they can't add new information to themselves. Like you can have a chat, but you don't have a database that you can really connect with these things. And so to have like your personal data, my personal data in a system where an agent can be, accessing my Gmail and accessing my calendar and rescheduling things for me and booking flights and booking hotels and like, the giving me guidance on, my workout plan to let me know if I'm hitting my nutritional targets. I've got an Oura ring that I wear here that, is tracking all my vitals about, that's not going to chat GPT. That's not going to translate into something that, right. That's tracking that in real time and letting me know that. So ours are able to track in real time, and they're able to basically bring in multi-sensory type of and physical data. And so this allows for all kinds of different broader applications. This is kind of like the iPhone was not like your Nokia. Like it has like, it has a camera on it, but it has like an accelerometer. It's got a gyroscope. It knows when you're running or when you're in a car. It knows, right? There's sensory data in here, GPS and the rest that really the applications that were built on that access. So some use this capability for games. So you go to Strava and you're running and it's like, hey, you must be moving quickly, being able to tell whether you're driving and to turn off notifications or GPS for Uber and DoorDash and Postmates and everything else. So one other difference is because we can access the IoT, the Internet of Things and all the sensors in smart homes and environments like that, you can start to integrate that and create wildly interesting applications and workflows that will be managed by these artificial intelligence agents. So we're providing a whole nother set of levels of capabilities and then a marketplace that these AI agents and applications can be put in with one other sort of superpower for us, which is that unlike the apps on your smartphone today, all of our agents are able to work together. So they can actually collaborate. So yours and mine can like negotiate something and reschedule our next session here together if for some reason I'm delayed or can't make it, and it could just automatically do that without any human involvement. So you're really starting to shift from the information age to the intelligence age, and we want to be the platform to enable that.
Yeah, so that's a good way to put it. So I mean, I guess the big leap forward from something like ChatGPT or any of these existing softwares is they basically have an encyclopedia of data. And you can query it really quickly and they can spit something out, but they can't connect with the rest of the world and pull in all this other data, like your live calendar, or maybe if you have an Uber coming or any, like a flight coming up. So that's kind of like the big leap. Okay.
Yeah. That's one of the real keys, and they can't incorporate that data into their model. It's, you have to go back and add new data into the model that OpenAI or Google or anyone else making 1,000 data scientists in 2 years to kind of train it. Like they literally have to sort of train it. Ours are based on neuroscience, and so the brain doesn't learn like that. Like I have a 2-year-old son. He learned what a cat is by learning different examples of cats, but not like here's a billion examples of cats, right? Yeah. He saw a cartoon cat, and he saw a real cat, and then he saw a stuffed animal cat, and we said the word cat, and then he connected. Like it's about the connections between things that the brain has with synapses between neurons, not just layers and layers and layers of neurons doing computation. So our system actually creates this sort of synapses between these neurons and connects the dots.
So if I'm a developer and I want to build an app, like how much technical skill do I need to have to be able to build something? Like, is this going to be some serious enterprise stuff, or how complex is it?
So that's a very good question. I'm going to hedge my answer a little bit. I'm going to start by telling you what my goal is, which is that I would like 8-year-old kids to be able to build their own agents by the end of the decade on the platform. So that's the goal. No code, not even low code, no code. But to be honest, within the next 12 months, we actually expect that your main experience will be something closer to talking to an agent that helps you build an agent.
Okay.
And so, yes, there'll be integrations and all kinds of stuff where if you don't know how to, integrate Microsoft Azure and all these other things, but, there's a lot of plug and play solutions now, and everyone's moving towards low code or no code. Think of things like Wix and Squarespace as sort of precursors to that, right? Like you used to take someone with a particular skill set to make a website, now if you want to make a highly detailed, very oriented, very specific website with a lot of changes on, and your content management system and all this stuff sort of hooked up in the background with high levels of security, you got to go pay somebody. But if you just want a website that looks pretty decent, these tools are fairly good. So the barrier to entry will be, our goal here will be not just to enable, enterprises and industrial and sort of the software developers of the day, but really anybody. And you should be able to just customize and personalize and spin up an agent by yourself within, and honestly, you can start within, like, say, 15 minutes, and you'd have something running. And then because our agents can learn new things, you can come back the next day and be like, let me add some, like, I'm not comfortable yet giving it my Mint information to automate my finances or give me, tax advice. But someone then is going to build an application on our system that is going to do that. Like, it could be Fidelity builds out something, or some other accounting firm says, oh, cool, here's our agent for tax advice. And all of a sudden your agent can just talk to that agent. So you don't need to incorporate that knowledge on our network. You can do knowledge sharing, just like you and I are doing like humans, right? So that's what's, I think, first it's making an agent, right? That the barrier to entry to do that. But next it's about connecting them into this sort of, the social network of knowledge sharing. And that becomes wildly valuable. And then what these things can do is start to automate decision-making and automate activities, not just generate media as an output, which is still amazing.
I think the AI app store you're building is probably one of the areas that excites me the most. Just looking at what that did for Apple, they take a cut of all of these apps. They don't build any of them themselves, and it's this massive. I don't even know if you have. Do you have the numbers of what they're bringing in just from the app store? I'm sure it's monstrous.
Let's see. We'll test my back of the napkin math here. I think 70 billion, 80 billion.
It's something that's okay. I was going to say 70, so that sounds.
But I think on the hardware is maybe 130, 120, 140, but the margins.
Yeah.
And the growth arc. So I don't know when, but I think, again, back of the napkin math, somewhere within the next 3 to 5 years, both the largest sector, the most of the money that Apple makes will come literally from the fees they take off of the app stores. Their services. If you look at the K1, or their investor reports, it's a services slice of the pie there. And so that's, you could argue, I think successfully, that's the most successful business model in history. It's like a franchise, but you don't even set up the stores.
It's just amazing.
It is. And so it's hard to compete with that approach as a better approach. I think that in our opinion, that is the marketplace, the ecosystem approach. There is a difference though, because Apple apps only work on Apple hardware. Right. It's a closed ecosystem, right? And that's always been part of their thing, part of their quality assurance, standards. But our approach allows us to be part of an open ecosystem. It's like my Apple apps don't, they'll connect to, but since they don't work together, I can't connect all my smart home things through my iPhone. It doesn't connect to my Tesla. Yes, there's an app for Tesla on there, but I can't have my Tesla or my phone alert my Nest that I'm on the way home and I'm this far away, and because the weather is X outside, and to start heating up the house. That's what I was like. I don't want the Nest to try to guess whether it should be this hot or that hot. I want it to know because the motion detector is told that someone's in the house, or that its grandma's in the house instead of me in the house, who might want a different temperature. So all this automation and personalization that we really want from the system is not capable in the current architecture. And even the state-of-the-art approaches are limited in this way because, in a way, they don't interface with the world in network structures. They're just kind of little units, and each of these little units do something. So we get tools, and now maybe we get power tools, right? These new AIs are kind of power tools, but what we're missing is the general contractor, the ability for something to sort of architect and adapt, and the quarterback on the field, right? So you get all these little expert systems, wide receiver, linebacker, but you need someone to call the plays, and you need something that understands a higher level of context about the operations of the world. And the way that we've structured our AIs, that's the first thing that happens. They understand physics and they understand logic, and you don't have to add those bits. They're going to kind of come preloaded, and then you're going to shape them with your stuff, and then they'll adapt to what you need. And it sounds very sci-fi, but that's where we're going now.
Well, I'm going to use that discussion of the future to transition. I want to talk about Carl. So Dr. Carl Friston, he's a big deal. He joined your team. You guys wrote a white paper. So why don't you first give us a quick background at who is this guy? Why do we care? Why is he so important? And then let's dig in a little bit into the white paper at a high level.
Yeah, so usually when you have someone of Dr. Carl Friston's stature in a press release in the business world, it's because they've been hired by Google or Facebook or Amazon or some big company as some chief scientist or some sort of key advisor. So Dr. Carl Friston is largely considered to be one of the top, if not the top, neuroscientists in the world. He's one of the most cited scientists in history. And he's a professor at the University College London, which is a sort of well known as one of the top schools for neuroscience and artificial intelligence. And so Carl joined us about 6 months ago. We've been in dialogue for a couple of years. And a lot of his former students work for the company and have worked for the company for several years. We actually started grabbing a handful of these folks out of that world because we wanted to focus on an approach to artificial intelligence that was based on how the brain operates. So it's less about teaching machines how to learn and more about understanding how the brain works and putting those processes in software, sort of a top-down rather than a bottom-up approach. Over time, that I think caught the attention of their former professor. Carl, invented the mathematics behind the physics understanding behind what became fMRI scans. So how do we actually scan the brain and track anything? So, and then after that, he developed this theory called the free energy principle, which is sort of a correlate to what he also calls active inference, which is essentially the idea that the brain tries to minimize the difference between its assumption about the world and the actions that it can tell in the world. So you're trying to constantly guess what you think is about to happen or is happening, and then you're trying to test that theory. So if I'm reaching for my glass of water, the gap between my assumptions about what it is and where it is, allow me to actually function in the world. And if not, I miss it, right? And it's our ability to filter information. It's not about big data. It's actually about little data, and that in a specific context. This is why, so UCL has a huge neuroscience hospital and lab, and they deal with patients that have all kinds of neurological disorders and other related disorders. So people with autism, as an example, they're more dealing with big data. They're actually overwhelmed. Their nervous system's overwhelmed with the amount of information that's coming in. They can't filter and process and focus it as easily as the rest of us. And so it turns out that that's one of the superpowers of humans, is this ability to not process big data, but process little data and focus on what's contextually important. It's like, oh, this thing is moving towards me. It's a tiger. It'll tune everything else out. The nervous system will basically totally shift the chemistry of the body to just focus on that and then take a certain action. And so what you want is that kind of inherent capability built into software. There's this idea in the AI world, and it comes from all the sort of sci-fi films, we've been watching for decades here, what's called AGI. So sort of artificial general intelligence. Most AIs for the last several decades are kind of little experts, they're very good at one thing. So you get AI companies, that are public companies that might be AI for cybersecurity or AI for medical, healthcare or something else like that. But you don't tend to get something that can generally be smart like a human and then learn all kinds of different things and apply that to the world like we do, right?
Yeah.
So in most of the movies, there's AGI, which is general intelligence, and then that quickly becomes artificial super intelligence. And this is sort of the Skynet.
Skynet, okay.
You get the one big AI to rule them all, and it's always tapping into the internet and then trying to learn everything and take over the whole world, right? Inevitably eliminate all the humans is job number one. Which is it's a bit funny to begin with, because because if something does have a higher intelligence, like let's say us, we don't really make it our mission to go kill bugs. I mean, we may build a freeway and it kills bugs. Just we're not paying attention to bugs. We don't care about the bugs. But like we don't be like our mission is kill all bugs. So these these are dramatic tales about those ideas. Well, the current approaches to building AI, as I talked about, it's a large industrial process. Try to give it all this data and then see how much it can learn. And then you kind of tweak it and test it out. And they literally give it the answers until it gets it right. And that's produced this sort of state of the art that we're seeing now. So one would argue that the current approach basically is this road to kind of a monolithic super AI. Like who can build the biggest, baddest AI? Our white paper that we put out argues for a different approach. It basically says that it's called ecosystems of intelligence from first principles. It says based on the underlying function of physics and the way that nature uses that to build ecosystems of intelligence today, which we would argue that the human body is an ecosystem of intelligence, that forests are ecosystems of intelligence, that the relationship between things causes essentially communities of intelligence at different levels. Like your red blood cells can coordinate activities for you, and swarm on something in a way that doesn't require your brain to do anything, right? You don't have to think about digestion. You don't have to think about pumping your heart. You don't have to think about breathing. So there is a fundamental intelligence like kind of at every scale. So the idea is that by incorporating so-called artificial intelligence, we actually would argue this isn't artificial. It's just sort of software-based approaches to intelligence. That coupled with humans build out lots of different intelligences that are better or worse at different things that can collaborate and work together and essentially build out ecosystem scale so-called artificial super intelligence. And that's the actual path to super intelligence is through this sort of ecosystem-based approach that really is just an extension of what nature is doing instead of say in carbon in silicon.
So this opens up so many different use cases of where you guys could go with this technology. And I mean, there's a million things. Last video, we talked about Wayfinder. Is there any specific application for your technology that gets you most excited? I don't know if there is one that jumps out right away.
Well, there's two that are really big and interesting that I find personally interesting. The first one is sort of last year's hype train. So this idea of an immersive version of the World Wide Web that you can go in and have some limitless immersive experiences, aka the metaverse, right? So the idea has been around for 30 plus years, and so now what you're seeing with generative AI, the ability to design and make imagery, right? And I'm already seeing people take stills and then stitch them together into videos. In fact, Google's got one that's already starting to simulate video as well. And then I'm seeing people take those, figure out how to basically create the imagery in such a way that you could put it inside of a virtual reality in sort of the way that the Oculus glasses work is you have to shape the images a certain way. And it's generating, immersive environments. I'm seeing other people doing like text to game worlds. It's like creating little Unity game worlds out of just typing about it. A whole scene with a city and a character, and the character starts walking. So you can see where this is going. And I wrote a book in 2019 called The Spatial Web: How Humans, Machines, and AI Will Transform the World. And in it, I talk about this fact that the AIs are going to be able to generate real worlds, like a choose your own adventure experience for you at the drop of a hat. And then, without going to like the metaverse and being able to bounce between all these places, which I certainly think will come, but not on the timeline that I think people would hope for. And I don't think it's fundamentally based on blockchain. I think it's actually based on AI. However, you could see like you could have an immersive experience that would be generated for you in real time by your personal AI, right? And so that one's fantastic because you can think of all kinds of experiences that are personal to you that might, calm you throughout the day or be entertaining or be exciting. And instead of sitting down and watching Netflix or Amazon where someone else has created a sort of fixed narrative, this would be something that's completely personalized for you. So that's really exciting. I think that's incredible. Imagine you could participate and, do it together. Have lots of people sort of co-creating that in real time, a bit like jazz, right?
Right.
Or like improvisational sort of comedy or plays or whatever. These are things that we can do. Rappers are able to sort of freestyle. This is freestyle AI immersive experiences. I think that one's going to be fantastic. The second one is what I think the real possibility here. So instead of something that sounds like a bit more frivolous like that, is the opposite. We've got planet scale problems. And we can't coordinate or collaborate at planetary scale as humans. We're not very good at it. And certainly not in real time. We need to sit down and make councils and debate and discuss things for a few decades and pass rules and laws. And we don't even really have like good information. And we find out we don't have good information. And so we've got different interests. It's a challenge. But there are existential issues that we have here that, should not just be about escaping to the metaverse. And, climate change, social equity issues, pollution, ecological challenges at one level, economic and societal challenges on other levels. And we need something that allows us to share knowledge and information at that kind of scale, do simulations of potential outcomes at scale that are planetary scale, not like, let me just simulate, the best output I can get from my manufacturing plant or my warehouse, but like the entire supply chain, right? What is its impact? How could we optimize that to be more in alignment with the type of regeneration goals that we should have, at planet scale? So I think that personally, the sort of meta application, if you will, is the combination of parties building all types of solutions and applications that start to create, like we talked about, the sort of autonomic nervous system that beats your heart and digests your food and breathes, 90% of what your body's doing right now, you're not doing. Right. So if you think about the supply chains and what robotics and real-time sensing and AI could do in collaboration, the sort of ecosystems of intelligence, if you will, you get to the place where you get to this idea of what we call a smart world, not just a smart city, but the whole world becomes kind of smart. And so if you can do that in a way that allows you to have that large-scale interoperability that our approach to AI provides, and the ability to govern and control these things and sort of the limits of what they're able to do, which is also part of what our system is designed to do. And the spatial web standards, which I think we might talk about in a bit, create that sort of put the bridle on the horse thing, which gives you, control gives you the ability to direct. And that would then, give us a sort of steering wheel for the planet.
And you mentioned supply chains and the smarter world. So perfect segue to get into Wayfinder. We talked about a lot more about it in the previous video. So again, those of you watching, if you're not familiar with Wayfinder, go check out the previous video to get a deep dive. But this is one of those applications that is very easy for anyone to understand. You're just like increasing efficiency and somebody going through a warehouse and picking and packing and sending out packages. And you save the companies a ton of money. You keep a bit of it for yourself. Everybody's happy, and they, ask for a 10-year contract. Clearly, you've proven the success for Wayfinder. So why don't we talk a little bit more about how you're going to scale it? Are you looking at markets, outside of retail and warehousing, for example? Like, let's just dig into a little bit of that.
Yeah. So I think maybe to connect the dots, if you will, like when Apple first came out with the iPhone, 2007, Steve Jobs walks out on stage, here's the iPhone. There's like 10 or 12 apps on it, right? Yeah. All the apps on there are made by Apple because they're the only ones who knew how to work and develop on iOS, right? Mm-hmm. The next year they come out and they go, introducing the App Store, Angry Birds and Chase Bank app and whatever. So the diversity of apps and who made those apps suddenly became third parties. But if they'd shipped the phone without any apps on it, you wouldn't use it. It's like, well, it has email, right. It's got maps, it's got calculator, it only had
it's a BlackBerry.
Yeah, basically like a better BlackBerry, right? But then it became something much more. So Wayfinder was the first agent that we spun up on our own platform to try to test out this theory. So it was a proof of concept that turned into a $33 million contract because it worked. So we went and tested it. So this essentially, it's like a navigation agent that each worker gets that has their own agent that spins up and then routes them through the workflow that they need to do in the facility, speaks to them in their own language, and then kind of exports all this to a digital twin of the facility so that the floor managers can see what's happening and even see the efficiencies and time that everyone did. So that was the first test. We did that. That rolled out in 21, and then in 22, people expected us, well, go get 10 more of those. I mean, you're making a couple $1 million a year off this. You've got 35 to 50% productivity gains. Those guys signed a 10-year contract because they'd never seen anything, operate that well in the industry. And we said, well, we don't want to build a sales organization. We're not even trying to build apps. We're building apps to demonstrate the capability of this. But since this app is being so effective, let's not go door to door and get 10 more and get $20 million. Let's go to the number one warehouse management system provider in the world, which is called Blue Yonder, and see if they would like to pick it up and become the reseller. So instead of 10 more, you got 3,500 more. And those 3,500 might be 10 to 100 times larger than our first customer. And so Blue Yonder picked this up. We announced that reseller agreement, I think in October, November. And so now as we roll into Q2, Q3, they're going to start spinning up those customers. So the advantage there is that you got hyper credibility, state of the art, technology with the largest global provider. They sell in 80 countries. Most of if you go to their website, you're going to see logos that you're familiar with. Many of the stores at your local mall probably run their distribution center off of the Blue Yonder platform, right? So have them go essentially resell that for us, and we think that that's probably in the ballpark of $1 to $2 million per customer net for us. And so with a soft target of somewhere between 10 and 30% of those converted within 3 years. So you can see, like, just off one app, one agent in one industry with one reseller, one. You can see a path to hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue here, and that's just the calculator app or the Maps app on the Apple phone. Like, ultimately, that's not what we're in. That's not the business. But because it has GPS, it had accelerometer, it had this ability to track you. Well, now you had a device that could enable ultimately that same capability. Think about it, that Apple had. Enabled Uber, enabled DoorDash, enabled Postmates, enabled Airbnb, right? Because the underlying capabilities that were necessary for them to build maps. But in the end, most people don't use Apple Maps, they use Google Maps. Right. And Apple makes money off of everybody else that built multi-billion-dollar business, unicorns. Like many users, 1,000 unicorns or whatever, perhaps have been built on top of that platform. So the thing I want you to catch here is that most of the time, and what investors are usually looking for and what they expect is that you're coming along, you're saying, we're building a better mousetrap. It's an industry they understand, and people used to do it like this, we're doing it like that, better, faster, cheaper, pick two, that kind of thing. About every 15 years, something completely different happens. So if you think about it, like, we've got computers sitting on desktops in the 80s, right? And late 70s, the kind of first one comes out. And about 15 years later, 1992, World Wide Web. So instead of programs as the main application, we use these web applications called websites, right? So those are all interconnected. 1992, 2007, Steve Jobs walks out, 15 years later. Whole new platform, whole new computing age. Not websites, mobile applications. Oh, smartphone apps. And then you go, all the developers, everyone goes over there. Watch this, 2007, 2022, 15 years. AI, that's the new program, that's the new application, right? And so when this happens, you're not talking about just a disruption, because the other things continue to grow as well, and we can get rid of websites. However, it enables the next million disruptions. So the companies that come out, and when it's an infrastructure fundamental revolution, those companies enable the next million disruptions. And so that's what Verses is doing. That's what's happening. AI is coming across the line, and whoever can basically be the right sort of enablement layer for these things will be the biggest winner. And investors don't tend to see that because they're always looking at, you show up and you're in an industry and you have a new way of doing something in an industry. We're not talking about that. We're talking about a fundamental shift to the entire computing stack. And that's where there's something special.
And so this is all rooted in where it all began with the spatial web. That's the name of the book that you wrote. Do you want to talk a little bit about the Spatial Web Foundation? Like, just anyone who's not familiar, what exactly is it, and what are you doing to try to rally support and bring new people into this initiative?
Yeah, I mean, sort of through that lens of multiple waves, coming, you can say Web 1.0 is 92 to 2007. Web 2.0 starts with the mobile device, and Web 3.0 just basically started. And so what we called Web 3.0, which is not to be confused with the blockchain sort of cruise, like DeFi's new, rebranding as Web 3, which for whatever reason is missing AI and IoT. But those are what you need to build a network, right? And so our definition of Web 3.0 is essentially a stack, and you have data at the bottom, you've got logic in the middle, and you've got some sort of interface at the top, classic computer science stack. That data is being processed at the edge, which also means it's hyper-distributed, which can mean things like distributed ledgers and blockchains. The logic layer moves from mobile apps to AI, right? And so you kind of go from the cloud to the edge, you go from, apps to AI at the logic layer. And the interface goes from essentially touch screens to like augmented and virtual reality, voice, right, gesture, like natural ways of interfacing. So that's our definition of Web 3.0. So we wrote a book called The Spatial Web, which is this third era of the web, which we predicted was coming. And that instead of a web of pages, it would be a web of spaces. So like the world itself becomes networked, and inside of these spaces would be sensors and IoT devices, robots, and it will all be powered by AI. And so the book became an international bestseller. When we rolled it out, you can find this today on Amazon. And then at the same time that we were doing that work, we felt that the underlying capabilities here to enable this next generation of the sort of web in the world needed standards for interoperability and standards for governance of these technologies, in part because of how powerful they are. And so we, coming from an R&D background in advanced R&D over many decades, myself and my co-founder decided that we would spend the first 2 years just trying to see if we could prove out the ability to make this new set of standards for this web, much like HTTP and HTML were for the World Wide Web. We created HSTP, which instead of hypertext is hyperspace transaction protocol, and hyperspace modeling language. And so one is able to model knowledge in a way, context about the physical and human world in a way that AIs can understand, and the other is a way of sending that information back and forth between different computers. And so we set up the Spatial Web Foundation. We donated that intellectual property to that nonprofit organization, and then we went to the IEEE, which is the largest standards body in the world, standardized Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, internet, and they said that they would then put this into their process to standardize it with many of those other classic standards. We're probably between 12 and 18 months away from that becoming now the default standard for interoperability, governance, and sort of workflow management, even security and privacy, and many of the other sort of factors that we care about here that are built in. So there's lots of different members that join that working group from all over the world, go through a process of ratifying and adopting those standards. And so I think we're probably about 2/3 of the way through that process, and expect that to come across. Now, KOSM, our platform, is actually built on a proto version of those standards. So when developers begin developing applications on our platform, it will likely, for a while, be the only platform that you can have these types of standards. And that's why, and develop applications on them. That's why when I talk about things like our AIs being able to communicate together and share information and be interoperable, it's based on the research that we did around the standards and the fact that we felt that it was important to donate that as a public good, then build capabilities to enable that, and monetization would come from the result of that, because what we've enabled is better for ecosystems to develop around.
So, wow. Okay. We have covered so many things in this video. This is always such a fascinating story, digging into it. It's the learning curve is steep, but once you get down that rabbit hole, you just get lost in the applications and the significance this is already is having, but it's going to continue to have. So as my kind of final thing I want to leave you with, it's just like, if you're speaking to investors and they're considering whether or not they should buy your stock, whether or not they should support you on this mission, like what's kind of one statement you'd make to them as to, like, I guess the question is, why invest in VERSES? Keep it simple like that.
Well, other than the reasons we've outlined, which perhaps just to summarize of that, essentially assembled a team of top engineers and developers from some of the largest companies in Silicon Valley, with experts in artificial intelligence and robotics and Internet of Things and spatial computing, with some of the world's leading scientists and computational neuroscientists, to develop really digital brains, like intelligence processes and software that are going to enable this next generation of business and personal assistance, intelligent assistance for anything. They'll be able to work together on our network to coordinate and collaborate at scale. In addition, though, when you think about the timing of catching those waves, those big waves as they sort of come every 15 years or so, right? Who makes most of the money for the first 5 to 10 years on those waves? It's the VCs and private equity, because they get to invest in the startups of all the names of the big companies we've talked about, where the public doesn't get the first bite for usually somewhere between 7 to 10 years. So 1,000x returns are already going to happen in many AI companies over the rest of this decade, and the public will not even have a chance to participate. VERSES, essentially, everything we've done has been in some way oriented to the public. So we donated our original intellectual property as a public standard to a global standards organization, as a public asset. They actually declared a public imperative. That's the highest designation. We write a book describing our entire vision for the future and the role of these technologies and the concerns we have around them and the importance of building things like standards and being able to govern them. And then we take our company public, so the public can actually own it along with us. So if you'd like to come on the wave of the next generation of AI here, of advanced technology, where else are you going to get your exposure to AI? You can't invest in a VC. I mean, maybe a handful of us can, but you're going to buy Microsoft to its exposure to OpenAI. That's marginal. This right. is, I think VERSES is the only pure play horizontal AI company in the world right now, but we're also one that happens to be public. So that would be my pitch to you. Come aboard.
That's a good answer. Good answer. Yeah. Where are you getting your AI exposure? I like that. Yeah. Gabe, you continue to blow my mind. Thank you so much. And as a proud shareholder, always love hearing these updates. And if you're not a shareholder yet, just a reminder, VRS.NE, that's on the NEO in Canada, over the counter in the US, VRSSF. If you're into warrants, that's your flavor, VRS.WT.A. Gabe, thank you so much for taking the time. I honestly can't wait to do this again. For those of you guys watching, if you haven't seen the original video, make sure you watch that. Any question or comments, put them below. We'll get back to you. Gabe, thank you so much.
Thank you, Kevin. It's such a pleasure to be here. Looking forward to the next time.